Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about authenticity, and we have here with us Deborah Fortney. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thanks, Jeevie. I'm really delighted to be here.
So Deborah, tell us a little bit about what got you into this line of work with authenticity.
Well, I think I came into authenticity quite a few years ago. I've always worked with large organizations, either through government or private industry, and I started to really examine how people came into their work every day. And what that made me realize is that I heard so many stories of people saying, I have to go to work again, or it's Monday morning, or I have to be here. And it really amazed me that people took that as reality. And as I got more and more into working in coaching, I became an executive coach about 14 years ago. As I started to work with coaching, I realized there was a real self behind the selves of people that came into the workplace, the ones that would talk to me as part of a coaching session.
Okay.
And I began to realize that we needed to do more connection between how we felt we needed to be in an organization and who we really were as human beings. And I really started to notice the difference in that with the complexity of the diversity that was coming into the workplaces over the last 10 to 15 years. So I got excited about this when I started to have the coaching conversations and realized that not only could we do this on a one-on-one setting, where we could start to bring out authenticity in people and authenticity in the kinds of conversations I was having, but we could start bringing it into teams. And I really saw this manifest into reality about 7 years ago when I was working for a large accounting firm in the United States. And I had one of the partners come to me one day and he said, I was at a client site and they told me that they were getting amazing business outcomes because they were having real conversations. And I said, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
And he said, well, they talked about the stuff that really mattered rather than just sticking to the agenda. And I said, yes. And he said, do you think we could do that here? And I said, absolutely. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
And we started to come in and have really authentic conversations with teams. And it was amazing to me at how surprisingly easy it was.
Okay.
It wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So, Deborah, I heard something you said in there was really interesting about, you said coaching conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So are there different types of conversations? What does that mean?
You know, if you'd asked me that about 5 years ago, Jeevie, I would have said yes.
Yeah.
I think what I'm realizing today, that any time when two people can get past sort of the artifice of what we think we need to be as business people,
Okay.
and we can start truly listening to each other and being curious about each other, a whole new dynamic enters that conversation.
Okay.
And so where I would have said I was coaching teams maybe 5 years ago, now I just say I'm having a conversation with the team and I'm coming in really curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what helps the conversation? Like if I was going to have a conversation with somebody and I was bringing my true self into that conversation, what would that look like?
I think it has an awful lot to do, and I think the best example I can give you is when I would prep leaders to come into a conversation, because it was something we built very organically and very by word of mouth. It wasn't something that we rolled out as a program when we started to have these different team conversations. And what I found I needed to do before we came into the room is I needed to have a really honest conversation with the leader about what they felt their success needed to be and where did the pressures lie. Okay. And what were their fears that what wasn't going to happen, and to get some of the belief systems that they had about what the possibility was of their team and of how they could lead that team. And it was almost as if as soon as they started to get the possibilities out of their head and the fears out of their head, space opened up for them to be able to bring in some of the realities of the team. Because, you know, there's this great quote by Susan Scott in Fierce Conversations, and she says, all conversations are with myself, and sometimes they involve other people. And what I was finding is that I was helping them get the conversation inside themselves outside. And that's subsequently what happened when the leader would come in. We followed the shut up and listen rule. Yeah. So that they could really hear their team, and they'd done enough of their own internal conversation outward that the team could start talking.
Okay.
And it was an amazing experience.
So Deborah, how you said the word organic in there. What does organic mean?
It really means that we just let it evolve the way it needed to evolve.
Okay.
What was really amazing about the process was that it was completely unstructured. So I have to set the context here. These are highly linear auditors who work to a very, very structured process and deadline on how they do their auditing work. So if you didn't walk into a meeting in this environment with an agenda, you were toast. It just didn't work. And what would happen is I would walk in with no agenda, doing the pre-work with the leader first, and basically just set up a diagnostic that allowed the team to put input in from every member that would give a collective view of what the team was, how they viewed themselves at that point in time. And then what we would do is we would have a conversation about the results on that diagnostic. It was simply a way to focus the team to talk with each other. And as we started to talk about the diagnostic, the stories would come out behind some of those descriptors on that diagnostic. So for example, one of the things was, we worked together seamlessly as a team. And they would get all excited about their scores. They were auditors, loved the numbers. And I'd say, well, what does it really look like when you're doing that? And the stories would come out in the room, and they would get so excited. And they would build on these stories, and they would build on how the client entered that dynamic. And by the end of it, everybody was really contributing from a really authentic place. The amazing thing was, it was usually the youngest member on the team. We would maybe be talking about something that was not talked about, sort of the unspoken thing in the room. And it would always be the youngest person on the team that would pipe up and go, well, aren't we just talking about this? And it would stop everybody in their tracks. So it was truly amazing. I think what I was most surprised about was how easy it was to get people when you were engaging them in a way that would allow them to really speak from their heart and their mind.
Now, Deborah, when we look at having a conversation authentically, the reality is that sometimes I would think, I know that when I am trying to be as authentic as possible, I look for an environment that's safe so that I can say something and hope that I'm not being judged. Like if I think about my life, I think I've had the most authentic conversations where I know that the person I'm having the conversation with will not be judgmental. Now, the reality is that you still work in a work environment, and even in our personal lives. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on even family and how we have those conversations within our family. The reality is that you're in an environment, possibly at work or within your family, where that authenticity may not be endorsed. So there may be a religious upbringing, a cultural upbringing, a community standard where you don't really say what you really mean, and you beat around the bush and you hope the other person gets the message.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about that. How does all of that intermingle?
Well, I'll stick to the business side first, and then maybe that will evolve into the more personal side of things. Because I think the family dynamic is very different in terms of sort of the intimacy and sort of the history that comes out of a family dynamic as opposed to what might happen in a business environment, though there are some parallels. What I would say from a business environment, again, it goes back to the pre-conversations we had with the leaders. And most of that conversation, where I said before, was getting the belief systems out in the room. There was also an awful lot of making the leader feel safe. Because most of the time, when you come into the room, and especially in the corporate environment that I worked in, it was about the leader saving face. And if we could get to a point in our relationship where they trusted the relationship we had between the two of us, where I was saying, this is for your benefit in the long run, this is how it's going to make you and your team successful, and they could get all their questions out about that, they started to get more comfortable and settle into the reality that this could work. I mean, their first thing was that nobody would say anything, because that is the environment we're used to. And they were always amazed that when they could stay curious, and they knew they had my support in that, in terms of both holding the best interests of that leader and the team at heart, this space opened up in the room. I can't describe it better than that, but there was a space that opened up in the room where people kind of sank into it and said, okay, maybe we can do this. And it was baby steps at first. Nobody was jumping out there in the beginning, and I would just keep asking curious questions, and through modeling, the leader would start going, oh, all I get to do here is ask really curious questions. It never failed, but by the end of the conversation, the leader would say, I learned so much